Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, in our last episode, we discussed debates and
Indeed.
what the current form of political debate is and is not, and what debate traditionally is and is not. And one of the things we mentioned during this discussion about debates was cognitive biases.
Yes.
And cognitive biases are the subject of tonight's conversation.
Right. It's similar to the earlier conversation we had about fallacies,
Yes.
types of fallacies. It's a similar list with some definitions, and it follows on as you said, our conversation about debate, because being aware of your cognitive bias informs how you enter into a discussion or a debate with someone. And that if you're trapped in a cognitive bias, when you enter a debate, it's easy to take apart an argument. Or it becomes easier to take apart an argument if you're basing your reasoning on a motivational bias.
Yes. So what I often see happen, and I see this in social media a lot. In fact, we were just talking about something, a discussion today that relates to a previous episode, that when people make a decision, they often do so emotionally rather than cognitively, and then become emotionally invested in the correctness of that decision. It's very difficult for people who are not being self-critical to actually change their minds.
Right.
And in fact, as I've taught consumer behavior, as I mentioned before, which I don't like the term consumer behavior because it's defining people in terms of what they buy. But essentially, it's behavioral psychology. Why do people do what they do? What motivates them to do what they do? And most people make most of their buying decisions emotionally and then justify it to themselves with facts.
Yes, rationalizing.
It's the difference between reasoning and rationalizing. In fact, which I have something I'll share as we get to it. But that, I think I see that a lot where somebody says something and it's very difficult for a lot of people to admit that they were wrong or they concluded something incorrectly or they didn't have sufficient information.
Well, and I think that what we're doing here, we're certainly guilty of it from time to time ourselves. I think the key here is not to expect everyone to be perfectly rational all the time about every single decision. Emotion enters into decision. It has to.
And you
have to be aware of it.
Yes. And it has a place. There is something called, thinking, your gut feeling. And there's actually scientific basis for that. And if you ever we tell people, if you have a bad feeling about something, you should understand, you should recognize that and acknowledge it. Don't use your intellect to say, oh no, everything will be fine. People get into all kinds of difficult situations that way. You have a bad feeling about a situation, something. Yeah,
Well,
you should acknowledge that. So there's a place for feeling. We don't understand intuition. Intuition could be the cognitive analysis of very subtle environmental clues or behavioral clues. We don't understand exactly what it is, but people should pay attention to that. What we're talking about are understanding the cognitive biases.
Right. And certainly you can make decisions that are more pleasing to you than a decision that's not pleasing to you. I mean, you can make those decisions. What we're talking about, what we are going to go on about is drawing conclusions, making choices without examining the facts and the reasons. You can still decide, well, it just makes me feel better to do that. As long as you're aware that that is why you're doing it, that you're actually embracing the fact that this makes me feel better than that, so I'm going to do that. It's bad for you. Well, it feels better now. And you can respect or disrespect somebody for acting that way. But you personally, we get back to being honest with yourself. So many times we keep coming back to, you have to be honest with yourself. How you proceed from there is up to you.
Yes. But you're doing so consciously.
Right.
So we're not talking about being entirely unemotional. We're talking about understanding and recognizing your own emotions. I often have to say to students, you have to understand the difference between I think and I feel, because often they say, I feel that, or they write, I feel that, when they're talking about what they conclude, and they say, I think that, when they're talking about how they feel. And it indicates that I tell them you should just omit those anyway in your formal writing, and just state your conclusions. But it's when you are making that confusion between thinking and feeling, you're not analyzing either of them. and that's detrimental to your decision making, and can have a lot of negative consequences.
But I think also that in the last, I don't know, let's say 40 years, just as a round number, I think that is a tactic in discussion sometimes to say, well, I feel, because you can't argue how I feel. Yes, I get to feel however I want. So I feel this. Well, you're not stating your feelings. You feel, your people will use I feel so that they can't be attacked about their feeling.
Right.
When they're actually stating conclusions, as you said.
Right. And so it can be an unconscious tactic, or it can be an intentional tactic to say, this is how I feel. You can't tell me how I shouldn't feel. Okay, you can talk about how you're feeling, but you're not talking about your feelings. You're not using emotional words to describe your feelings. You're saying you feel that these set of facts are correct or incorrect. It's what Stephen Colbert, on his first show of the old Colbert Report, where he played a character who happened to be named Colbert. In that very first episode, he coined the word truthiness for it's based on if it feels truthful, it's truthy. It's truthiness. And that was so incisive and so spot on satire, because, and I don't know if it was just before that or just after that, it came much after that, actually. Oh, because because his show started a decade before the last administration, when the press secretary said, well, we have alternative facts.
Well, that's the other thing, is another saying that I couldn't quote a source for, but you're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. I
think it was Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, long-serving senator from New York. I think he said that, but I'm not 100% certain. But it feels like it's something he said.
So that's the thing, is like, you can talk about your feelings all you want, but you can't argue the facts based on your feelings. You can only argue the facts based on the facts.
Right. And understanding evidence, data, facts, conclusions is really important. People say, well, why should I study this subject in school. I'll never use it. Why should I study math? Oh, geometry, you have to learn proofs. You have to learn this is given, this is true. How do I reason from this? What you're learning is not geometry. You're learning reasoning.
Show your work.
People have to take science classes in high school, or should, because you're learning scientific process, and it's important. It's important that people proceed from the data to the conclusion, which is reasoning, rather than the other way around, which is rationalization.
Right. And before we proceed any further,
yes,
I have an important question. What are you drinking?
I had a feeling you were going to ask. I have.
Well, that's very intuitive of you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I have a very nice French Vouvray, a light, very refreshing white wine that paired very nicely with what I made for dinner, which was sauteed chicken and asparagus and onions in a tomato Asiago sauce, and it was the perfect accompaniment for it. So I'm still drinking it.
Oh,
and I have a feeling, I have a strong intuition.
That feeling is based on lots of evidence preceding.
It is. It's a conclusion. I conclude that you have a drink in front of you.
You predict. Accurately predict that I have a drink.
And what is that?
That is an old-fashioned made with an old-fashioned mix and a Origins made by the New Holland Distillery. It's a Dragon's Milk brand bourbon.
Okay.
From New Holland Distillery here in Michigan. So,
what is an old fashioned is pretty simple. What is an old fashioned in an old fashioned mix?
It's the
the bitters and the sweetener and the
it's vermouth, sweet
vermouth, yeah.
Sweet vermouth, I think a little bit of orange flavoring to simulate the muddled fruit that usually goes in.
Okay, yeah.
It just comes in a little squirt bottle, pre-mixed flavoring, and I add a little bitters to it just to even it out a little bit because it's awfully sweet. But it's rather than keeping sweet vermouth in the refrigerator, this doesn't require refrigeration. So, but and in a pinch, in a hurry, it was quick. And I don't keep fresh fruit around for muddling. So, and this paired excellently with the dinner that I prepared, which was chicken cordon bleu.
Oh, very good.
That was actually just frozen stuffed chicken breast, and I put 2 of them in the toaster oven. So, but I did that myself.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Yes, and
good for you.
And I turned on the microwave to cook the frozen vegetables that went with it as well.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm just so impressed. Yeah.
I've never claimed to be a cook. I say I don't cook. I heat. That is, and we understand that role for me in this house.
Yep.
I take my turn, but I don't spend an hour doing it.
Okay. I enjoy cooking. We both enjoy cooking, and essentially making things up and then saying, "Oh, this needs something. What do you think it needs?" Well, I think it needs. It's fun. So anyway, before we begin here, or in order to begin, I'm going to share this cognitive biases chart here. And the source of this, there's a link below. It was shared by someone named Justin Wright on LinkedIn. And it's very useful. And we're going to be going through these. I'm not going to leave this up while the whole time we talk, but we're going to be going through these and then adding some additional information. So, but I wanted to let people know, and we will share this with our post of this episode as well.
Yeah, it was just a handy, concise,
yes,
cheat sheet, like it says on there.
Yep. Okay. So the first one is anchoring bias, and that is heavily relying on the first piece of information that you see. So there have been lots of examples in the news where the first piece of information somebody hears may be incorrect. The story is not complete, may be incorrect, but that's what people will then believe, no matter what information comes afterwards.
Right. Yeah, and often what comes to people first is often just a rumor.
Yes.
And often it's a salacious rumor where, you know, the worst possible light is cast on this thing, whatever it is. And because it's ratings, right? In the media, it's all about getting ratings and getting eyes on it and getting people searching it. So,
well, and there's over the past 40 years, 50 years, there's been a change in the media because news media will now report rumors. They'll say it's rumored that, it's being reported that, and that they never would have done that before. There'd have to be 3 independent sources confirming it. And so one of the things that happened is there are bloggers who will state something with no basis in fact that is then picked up and reported as a rumor on news media, who then people are asked about it, like politicians and public figures are asked about this rumor, and then they say, well, no, it's not true. And then the actual legitimate, I don't use the term mainstream media because that's become pejorative. The legitimate credentialed news media will then report there's a rumor or so-and-so denies.
Right.
And so it's only taking that anchoring bias and magnifying it in a terrible way.
Right, saying someone denies claim that so and so, they denied it because it isn't true. It's not they're hiding from the allegation, and that's the way it's framed. You know, they're hiding from this allegation. They're in complete denial. They're denying this, and they won't answer questions. And what's really going on here? That, you know, the typical Tucker Carlson kind of thing. I'm just asking questions. What's happening? Lots of people are saying this. Well, lots of people are saying it because you're pushing it.
And lots of people, or some people say, or I hear, is also misleading.
Right.
I think there's another.
And that leads us right directly to the authority bias, which is.
Before we get to that, there's another iteration of anchoring bias that is, it's seeing like a menu. You look at a menu or a wine list, there'll be something outrageously expensive on it that the restaurant does not expect you to order the food or the wine of that super really outrageously expensive thing. But it's there because that's the anchor. And so you see the next thing, which is also outrageously expensive, but it looks like a bargain in comparison. And that's another example of anchoring bias
or taking advantage of anchoring bias.
Yes, exactly. But as you said, we were leading into authority authority bias.
Now, this is an interesting. So you trust opinions from perceived. I think perceived is the question. There is the operative word there. You trust opinions from perceived authorities more. Well, you should trust opinions from authorities. Somebody who has studied a thing, has multiple degrees in a discipline, and they say that this is my opinion based on, my 2 master's degrees and
This is my
PhD.
conclusion. Yes, based on.
So you should listen to that person. It's the perceived authority of someone like, as it says here, of a celebrity.
Yes.
A celebrity is not an authority.
Celebrity endorsement. So what's going on there is often, as a marketing tactic, is something of transferring of positive affect. Yes. So there's actually something called a Q score, which is how celebrities are rated, public figures are rated by their likability. And the higher that is, the more they can get, the more they're sought after as a product endorser, and the higher fees they command. Because if people like Tom Hanks, everybody loves Tom Hanks, right? So if Tom Hanks endorses something, the positive affect, the positive emotions that people feel towards Tom Hanks, it's believed will transfer to positive feeling for the product. He's trustworthy. He says this. I like him. I will now like this. I trust him. I think that I think celebrity endorsements are often really lazy marketing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because people don't.
But they go all the way back to the beginnings of broadcast marketing, though.
Well,
before that.
And Charles Lindbergh, who was famous for being the first man to fly solo across the Atlantic, people then wanted to know what products he used and everything. It's like the old Rolling Stones song. Was it Rolling Stones?
David Bowie song. What song? Major Tom.
Yes, they want to know what
the papers want to know what shirts you wear.
Yes, exactly. It's that exactly. And Bowie. How I got that wrong? I know I was thinking the Stones. Anyway.
Well, it's because of I can't get no satisfaction. There's a similar line.
Oh yeah.
I'd have to sing the whole song in my head to come up with so.
That's okay. But that's the point, that I have always questioned the effectiveness of that. It is an effective technique sometimes, that authority bias. What's a worse application of that in celebrity endorsements, is the example they give, is political figures who state things that are not true, but they are considered the authority. People will believe them. And we could get into the idea of cults and what a cult is, and that's something that we could talk about at some point. So that leads into the next cognitive bias, which is, and I think I said this, I'm going to, little side note here. I think I said this last time. I knew that I was in graduate school when, instead of saying thinking and feeling, I said cognition and affect. And and I think that's still the case. I still think of those, but that leads to the next one, the bandwagon effect.
We skipped availability.
Oh, I'm sorry, the availability heuristic.
You judge things based on info readily available or easily recalled. So you take a simplistic view because it's easy to remember, or you have a pithy quote. for this
or
thing.
an anecdote about
Yeah.
it. Anecdotes are not evidence. Well, I
Right.
know somebody who, or I heard of somebody who,
Right.
this,
Or I once had this, therefore all of these things are lumped
right,
together with it.
right. And it is, the availability refers to the availability of information that you recall, or either personally or having heard it. But that's not data. It's not evidence. It's a data point, but it's not sufficiently broad for effective decision making.
But it certainly is a marketing
Oh yeah, yeah,
thing that if a customer gets this product and has a bad experience with it, they will almost certainly stop buying that product. They will go turn to another product.
yes. But what's worse is that people who have bad experiences are much more likely to talk about it than people who have good experiences.
Right.
And so
12-1 is a 12-1 rule, isn't that? That's what I remember
it's
from
something
college.
like that. It's something I'd have to look it up. I'm not going to rely on just recalling the available information.
Well, in my recollection of it's 40 years old too. The demographics may have changed by now.
But it's since it is much more expensive to gain for a company to gain a new customer than it is to retain a customer, it is always worth the company's effort to take steps to alleviate someone's problem. A lot of companies offer very similar products. The differentiator is the quality of service. And so if it's actually relates to something Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, that if someone is an enemy, you have two choices. You can turn them into an ally or you can destroy them. Well, the companies aren't going to try to destroy somebody. What they want to do is turn someone into an ally. That is, if they can turn a negative review from a person, if they can turn that person's opinion positive, they've now created an ambassador for them who will talk about how the company made it right.
Right. Yeah. So they're no longer, they've taken the focus off the product, which may or may not have been satisfactory, but they've made the customer remember how well they were treated, which is an emotional.
Yes.
It's feeding on that emotion of how they felt about the interaction afterwards.
Exactly. I had a client many, many years ago in agency I was working at, whose products were deficient. And they said, hey, we know there was problems with it, but we've fixed them. Trust us again. Come back. We've fixed it all. Trust us again. And they hadn't. Oh. They lied. Ooh. And the public, their buying public, their consumer base, were saying they just don't give a damn, and they don't care about us. They don't care about their products. They just don't give a damn. So I proposed a campaign for them. This is a tough situation. I proposed that the CEO of the company take out a full-page ad with his picture and the headline, large headline, "We give a damn," to give people's attention, and then explain absolutely honestly what's going on. I mean, the rules of crisis management, public relations are say it first, say it completely, say it honestly, keep saying it, answer all questions.
Right.
And keep doing that and use all available channels of communication to do that. So I proposed this to them. They freaked out. So we can't do that. We can't admit I said, you're not telling anybody anything they don't know.
Yeah.
You said you had it fixed. You lied. People think you don't give a damn. I've talked to lots of your disgruntled customers, and the thing they all said in common was they don't give a damn. So here's your position. you do give a damn. But if you ever say, well, we've made it right, or there's no problem, you'll just continue to lose business. They never ran the campaign.
And are they still in business?
They're still in business as a subsidiary of a much larger company that took them over because they took them over cheaply because their market value had dropped so much.
Yeah, and that's the business model, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on.
Yes.
Bandwagon effect.
Yes, or also known as fear of missing out. Now, tending to follow popular opinions or trends. So, for example, you see other people buying a pet rock, you have to buy a pet rock. You see other people, everybody's got the thing, you need the thing.
It's fad following.
It is. And I haven't in many years gone to the Ann Arbor Art Festival, which is a 3-day street art festival with art. There are like 6 different art fairs going on, a juried one and non-juried and displays and other stuff. And every year there's a thing and somebody is selling the thing. It's usually a thing on a stick, like some kind of tchotchke on a stick thing is this year's thing. And somebody has it and everybody finds the one booth that has this and everybody buys it. And the next year, there are a dozen booths selling versions of the same thing on a stick and nobody's buying it because there's a new thing on a stick.
So it becomes a signature thing of the fair that everybody has to get to mark their attendance.
Right.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, I mean, it's kind of like, that's another way to, it struck me when I saw this list, how much of these things are marketing tactics. It's, I mean, a lot of ads, a lot of sort of simplistic older advertising is, look, everybody's getting this new thing. Right. Don't be the last person on your block to get this, to get a Frisbee or a scooter or, you know, all the way back to the 50s. Don't be the last person to get one.
So the fellow who invented the infomercial, including the line "operators are standing by,"
Ron Popeil.
It was somebody else who invented.
Or Ron Popeil?
Yeah, he just used it. He was used it, but he changed that line from "operators are standing by" to "if all lines are busy, please call back."
Okay.
So what he did was create the feeling, the emotion that I'm going to miss out on this thing. It's really popular, a sense of urgency. And the sense of urgency is related to the bandwagon effect or fear of missing.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. Yes.
And the example that's cited in the list, buying a certain phone because you see other people using it.
Right.
The iPhone is the perfect example of that.
I don't think we see people standing in line for 24 hours with a line around the block for the iPhone anymore for each new iteration of it.
Well, because it's become it's like, well, there's going to be another one next year. Why am I?
Yeah,
I'll wait and see, or I'll skip this next one and get the one, because the tiny incremental improvements that are made aren't worth buying a new phone top of the line every time when they're $2,000 a pop.
Right. I skip multiple generations.
Yeah, me too. I will skip until the new system won't load.
Well,
I'm an Android user, so
for me, and I use an iPhone because it works with a Mac, and it's but it's always it gets to a point where, do I pay to get the battery replaced, or do I or do I wait or do I get the new phone? What's the trade-in value? When will the trade-in value drop? So there's a cost benefit analysis, okay, I spend this much to get the battery replaced, but I can get this much now for a trade-in, but it's going to drop off if I do this. So and that's when I decide. And it's about 3 or 4 generations of product with them when that happens for me.
And what I'll do,
if it goes longer than that, I won't get anything for the trade-in, and the new phone's just going to be just as expensive. So
right, and I never count on trade-in value for my phone because there's not much. But what I'll do is I'll wait 4 or 5 generations, and then I'll get the next to newest generation.
Yeah.
And it's like a couple $100. Okay, perfect. Still works, and it'll work for 2 or 3 more generations.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't have the, I don't have the 15 megapixel phone camera. I only have the 13 megapixel camera, which is meaningless for most people. That, once you're beyond like 10 megapixels, that's a great photograph.
Can be, yeah.
I mean,
I'm actually
for selfies and snapshots and what most people use their phones for.
Yeah.
If you're not a professional photographer, why are you using your damn phone if you're a professional photographer?
Yeah, I mean, you can get some good results, but it's quick. If you don't want to always carry around your pro camera, because it's a pain to always carry a camera around. So, but even
when you're using social media as you're living, whatever, it has a limited bandwidth and anyway. So the best, biggest, fastest isn't really doing everything you think it is online. Yep. So anyway, okay. So confirmation bias. We've talked about this a lot.
We have. So confirmation bias is favoring information that confirms your existing beliefs and dismissing other beliefs that question, other data that questions your beliefs. Right. So it's related to something else called motivated reasoning, which is not on the list. So confirmation bias is, and I'm just looking up here to just because it overlaps with motivated reasoning. So motivated reasoning selects the information and dismisses the information that challenges your biases. And confirmation bias, it agrees with you, so you go to that. Right. So confirmation bias can be more unconscious, whereas motivated reasoning can be unconscious or conscious. It's like, I'm not going to listen to these people. They're all, people on the other side of the thing and the argument. I'm only going to listen to these people. Well, that's motivated reasoning. And then you listen to them and they confirm your biases. So they overlap very much. And so I want to actually show another diagram here. And this is reasoning versus rationalizing. So yes. I mentioned this before. So reasoning, body of evidence or data, and then using logic to analyze that data and reach a conclusion, versus rationalizing. You're starting with the desired conclusion. You're using motivated reasoning and confirmation bias to choose the evidence that you believe supports your a priori conclusion, your what you already have concluded. So the difference between reasoning and rationalizing.
Well, and it's like the difference, the scientific method starts with a question and ends with a conclusion.
Yes.
It doesn't start with a conclusion and only asks questions that confirm the conclusion.
Right. So heard about the it's this guy in Kentucky, I think, who has the Ark.
Oh,
Noah's
Tennessee.
Ark, Tennessee. Noah's Ark Museum. I apologize to Kentucky. This.
Oh, they don't need any apologies. Where do you think the patrons for that place
are? Yeah. Okay. So he believes that the reason that dinosaurs and people existed. He's like a young Earth creationist, right? Noah's Ark was real, but the dinosaurs didn't make it on board, right? So he's got displays of people, cavemen riding, supposedly cavemen riding dinosaurs. It looks like the Flintstones, right? But I heard him say once that people start with data and then reach a conclusion. He said, this is wrong. What you start with are the conclusions presented in the Bible, and then you find evidence to support, you interpret the evidence you find to support that. And that's, that is,
that's the worst kind of fallacious idiocy that leads people to believe things that aren't. If you believe that, if that is your methodology,
right,
someone can present you with a conclusion, and if you're at all inclined to believe that conclusion, nothing else matters.
Yes. Well, and people who can, it's the quotation, people who can be made to believe.
If you can be made to believe an absurdity, you can be made to commit an atrocity.
Yes.
I think it was Paine.
Thomas Paine?
Thomas Paine. Yeah. I think. I'm not sure.
I think it was Bowie.
Or maybe Mick Jagger.
Maybe Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger made a similar quote.
Yeah, and Mama's Little Helper. I think that was I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
Let's move on to Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger effect. Yes, people overestimating their level of expertise.
Right. And this is you learn a little bit about a topic.
Yes.
And assume, because you had zero knowledge before, now you've got this much knowledge. Now you think you have encompassed all the knowledge of this thing.
Right.
Because you've gone from zero to this.
Right.
When you go to this, and when you get, this much knowledge, you realize how, as you educate yourself, you learn how much you need to learn.
Yes, exactly. And a little learning is a dangerous thing. Alexander Pope. And he said that hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
I forget when he.
A little learning or a little knowledge? I think I've always heard it as a little knowledge.
A little learning.
Okay.
Is a dangerous thing. But it means it's the same thing. And it's because it's people will assume, having learned a little, that they know more than they do, and Dunning-Kruger effect. The endowment effect. You value things more when you own them.
Yeah.
The endowment effect is not what some people.
Well, and I've known guys like this growing up, and a mutual friend, me and this small group of friends when I was in high school, one friend, while talking about this other third guy, said he was doing sort of an impersonation of him. He said, "This tennis racket is the best tennis racket you can get." Why? Well, because it's the one I bought.
Yeah.
And he was like that about everything. No, I bought this. It's the best. Never mind. You're wrong. And he had no evidence besides the fact that he already owned it.
Right. I'm trying to think of other examples, but
Chevy truck owners, Ford truck owners, pickup truck owners of any stripe.
Yes.
My father had Fords. I've got a Ford. Chevys suck, or vice versa.
Well, and I think that's so related to the availability heuristic and the bandwagon effect, and
these all
they all mesh.
Yeah. And I think it goes to football fandom, even.
Yeah,
is similar in effect to this.
Now, the best marketing application of that I have ever seen, and I say the best because it was not only most effective, it was for a worthwhile cause. It was in a campaign in Brazil, and where the rate of people signing up to be organ donors was very low.
Mm-hmm.
But fans of their particular football team, their soccer team, were, amazingly loyal, enthusiastic, verging on fanatical,
as they are,
fans. So the campaign said, if you sign up in the name of your team, and when a person gets the organs, they are now fans. They are breathing. You are
transplantation.
Yes. Well, they now breathe, because people would say, "I bleed for the team. I breathe for the team. My heart beats for the team." Well, your heart beats for the team in someone else's body now. The organ donation list, volunteer signups for it, grew to such an amazing level that they no longer had a waiting list for organs.
Wow.
That's why I say it was the best use of that essentially endowment effect and bandwagon effect, because it was for a very worthwhile cause as well as being effective. So,
well, people who understand these human tendencies and proclivities, I'm glad that every once in a while their powers are used for good.
Yes, exactly.
You regain a certain amount of your hope for humanity when somebody recognizes that this is a problem, and if I can take advantage of this to do something good instead of just make money.
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations.
Well, and
the human race.
Yes, that's why every class I teach, I talk about ethics.
Yeah,
a lot. It's essential, and I also tell them that if they are going to work for a living, they will encounter ethical challenges at work, and I described some of the ones I've had, and I said, and you need to think about it now, so that you're prepared when the situation comes up, because you will need to make a decision. And sometimes the decision is, I can't work here anymore.
Right.
And that's a difficult decision to make. So,
and under those circumstances, when I've encountered things like that, I've simply said, I can't do this thing you're asking me to do. I'm not going to quit. You're going to have to fire me.
Yeah.
But I will draw the line here. I do good work for you, but I will not do this.
Yeah.
I will not serve that client. I will not.
Yeah.
Not put my hand to their goals.
Yep. And we could tell stories about that sort of thing a lot,
Sure.
because we both encountered those kind of situations.
Yep.
False consensus effect. You overestimate how much others agree with you. I don't think everybody agrees with us.
Well, only right-thinking people agree with us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, who cares about
well, and this is we hear this all the time from politicians, my constituents, the people who voted for you may believe you or agree with what you're saying, but you're not serving your constituency. You're serving your base.
Right.
So, and I mean, I get that. You promised that these are the things you would do, and a certain number of people voted you in to do those things. So, okay. But you're not serving your district. You are ensuring that you'll get votes again.
Well, and it's ignoring the people who
didn't vote.
Disagree. Right. And so if as a species, humans are going to continue, it's essential that people learn how to work with people with whom they disagree, how to talk, and that relies on communication. Otherwise, we devolve into tribalism, and that way.
Good thing that's not happening.
Yeah, well, and there are people who understand it and are using it not for good purposes. The halo effect. Now, they say the halo effect is judging a person's character from an overall positive impression. I think that there are other examples of the halo effect there. In fact, car makers produce vehicles that are considered the halo vehicles because people will look at that and go, "Oh, that's really cool. Well, I can't afford that. I'll just get I'll get the second most recent phone." Right.
That's just good business. Right there. That's just good business.
Right. But I'm joking, because people do that though. And one application, and what the example they give is judging someone candidate for a job because they're attractive. Right. And they're
likable, or they've got a good handshake, or
even just attractive. So there are many studies that have documented how physical attractiveness is an advantage for people.
Oh, sure.
In getting a job, in opportunities, all sorts.
I remember a study that talked about how taller men get promoted more quickly and more often than somebody who's, 6 foot plus. They get given opportunities and responsibilities and authority more often than somebody who is under 5'10".
Right.
So, yeah, that's a pretty old study, the one I'm remembering. So I doubt it. Don't think it has changed that much. There's a whole thing online talking about, and it borders on misogyny in a lot of ways, but there's a whole what's the word I want? A whole community of podcasts where guys are talking to women and pointing out the fact that the women, now a lot of these are like Instagram influencers, these women, right? Lots and lots of followers, or subscribers, or whatever you call them. And these women are saying that their criteria for a man in a relationship with them is plus 6 foot, has to make at least $70,000 a year, has to own their own home. All this list of requirements, and the guys are pointing out to them, you've described the top 5% of men, of all men. Your criteria is met by like 5% of them.
I would disagree with the characterization of that as the top 5. It's 5%.
Well, okay.
But not, yeah.
Well, but that is the female perspective of it. I want these.
Well,
I want
their perspective. Yeah.
Right. So all these. So you're and the at the same time the women are complaining about hookup culture and guys aren't faithful and well, why should they be? If this guy meets all of your criteria, he's got his pick because the other 95% of guys can't get dates.
Well, in this
well, from them.
So right. So ooh.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Oh, I am
right.
not championing this.
Right.
Idea
but
at
it's
all. It's just an interesting difference in perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's so incredibly materialistic.
Oh, yeah, and shallow and
yes,
all these other things.
And I have known couples who were conventionally attractive who made each other miserable. But at least they were only making each other miserable.
You two deserve each other kind of a relationship.
And there's another conversation to be had about what constitutes attractiveness. I'm not talking about beauty, but attractiveness. And that's another something for another discussion.
Sure.
Illusory connection. You mistakenly believe two unrelated things are connected. So believing in correlation, which is not
confusing correlation with causation.
Causation, exactly. Where my team is winning, I'm not going to change my socks as long as they're winning.
Yeah. There's tons of things we can point out for this.
It's superstition, really.
Yeah.
And when you believe in things you don't understand, it's trouble. Superstition ain't the way.
That's Stevie Wonder.
Yes.
Ricky Gervais, controversial comic, talks about how, if you're at the hospital and your mother's dying or she needs chemo, and people say they'll pray for her. So that's great, but we're going to do the chemo anyway.
Yeah.
Because that's the same as doing the chemo and praying. So, but thanks. I mean, we appreciate your what effort you're going through there, but we're going to keep doing the chemo anyway.
I think it was Pope Francis who said, pray for the poor, then feed them, because that's what prayer is. So it's an action, taking action. So, negativity bias. You focus more on negative events than positive ones. And they say dwelling more on one negative comment in a sea, one negative comment in a sea of compliments. Okay. So I decided when I used to do theater that I would not take compliments to heart, because then I would have to take negative comments to heart. I would instead rely on what I thought and my own conclusions. And
hubris, I say. But if you're an actor, you got to have a certain amount of that.
Well, you have to have a certain amount of confidence. And if you start questioning every decision you're making, you're not doing it by yourself. You have a director and producer, other actors, all sorts of people whose job it is to say something if you're doing something wrong.
Well, critical thinking can be applied to this as well. It's like, well, okay, that's a criticism. is it correct? Are they right? Do they know all the circumstances behind why this was done this way?
Right.
Well, it's a bias, right? And I think that it is an insecurity that leads one to this particular bias.
Yes.
That, but this one person didn't like me. Well, everybody else thought you were awesome, thought you were great.
Yeah.
So maybe that person has some kind of cognitive bias that kept them from liking you. But you can analyze the criticism. If you can analyze it honestly, you can decide whether or not it's something you can embrace and need to improve,
Exactly,
or ignore.
Yes, what people tend to refer to as constructive criticism.
Sure. You can turn horrible, stupid criticism into constructive criticism.
Yes, and there's a critique is a specific kind of collective discussion of work that's positive and has negative or room for improvement. And one of the things that design students, art students have to learn how to do is participate in critique, and to do so in a way that's useful, constructive, and so on. One play I was in, the student reviewer from the university came and hated it because it's far easier to write negatively about something. But the funniest comment was the criticism of my wig, which nobody believed was real.
I'm still suspect.
Yes, but they didn't mention the guy in the cast who was wearing a wig.
So they weren't even perceptive enough to actually back up their own assertion.
Right. Outcome bias. Judging a decision by its outcome, not the decision-making process.
Well, all's well that ends well.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it worked. I made money, so I must have made the right decision. I'm still in business.
We've seen people in, I'll use an SCA example, since many of the people who listen to us have that experience. I've seen people make bad decisions, say in a large armored combat melee situation, make bad strategic decisions,
or simply refuse to make any decision.
Right. But it worked out well in the end because of the individual initiative of other people and exceptional skill of other people. It worked out in spite of that. So they felt justified then in saying, see, I was right. It's like, no, other people saved your ass. So, I don't want to decide on this. Let's just move on and do something. Right.
And in the end, the justification is, well, everybody still had fun. So that decision, we didn't need to make any decision. I did the right thing. Let's just, because everybody had fun anyway, no matter what I did. So I really couldn't have done the wrong thing no matter what.
So I think that is an example also of people have illusions that they use as a defense mechanism. They believe things that are not true. Remember, we've talked about the necessity of honesty, veritas, particularly with yourself, about yourself, as the basis for many of the other virtues.
Mm-hmm.
That people have illusions about themselves, that they maintain those illusions as a way of defending them. It's a self-defense mechanism. They to admit otherwise would be too painful or too difficult or too.
And that's pretty natural. I mean, that's what therapy is for in a lot of cases, right? So again, we're saying that people may not be able to jettison all of these biases, right? That's very hard. That takes a lot of work.
Yes.
It may be enough to just recognize that they exist, that you may be, I want to say suffering from it, but you may not be suffering at all. You may be completely content with your biases, but
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, recognizing that, well, I think this, but why is it really helping me to think this? Is a hard question to ask yourself in many circumstances. Particularly, you have a very good quote actually queued up. I think.
Oh yes. Here we go. So this is from Upton Sinclair, the author, he said, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
Right.
And just for background, if people are not familiar with Upton Sinclair, his book, The Jungle, 1906, I think, uncovered problems in the meatpacking industry.
Yep.
And led to the formation of the government regulatory organization that eventually became the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Was called something else in its early days, like the Clean Food or something like that.
Yeah, and it was much more narrowly focused originally.
Yes.
But yeah, eventually just became all about safe food availability.
Which was necessary, but I think that there are certainly examples of look at West Virginia, coal mining. There are political candidates who will deny climate change because their constituency, their supporters, mine coal,
yep,
and want to sell coal, and so
their donors own the coal mines,
right. More importantly, because they don't give a shit about the coal miners. Because if they did, they would work to give them opportunities in other industries that were safer, cleaner, less damaging to their life expectancy, and less damaging to the planet.
Right. And I believe the current administration has made quiet but significant strides in doing just that, retraining and offering clean energy jobs to people in coal and oil and,
Yes. The recency effect, giving more weight to the latest information or experiences.
You see, when I first read that, I thought it said Regency effect. And I thought brocaded vests and
high collars.
Yeah, and top hats. I thought, well, what's wrong with that?
There's a guy on social media who makes and wears. That's all he wears are Regency garments that he makes, and he does videos showing the multiple layers and how he dresses and how things are made and stuff. It's really interesting. So it's a good look. I like it.
I maintain that was the height of men's fashion. It is the most flattering and masculine of any period's garment for men.
So you don't like a 1940s sack suit?
Nope.
Baggy with like 8 pleats in the trousers that come up just under your rib cage.
Right, where you're just like a big square with sleeves. Yeah, no, exactly. Not for me. No.
Yeah, I agree. So giving more weight to the most recent experiences. There are people
you're just simply easily influenced.
Right? Yes, there are people we have known who make a decision based on who spoke to them last and loudest?
Yeah, I think to be more generous to some people that I know who I think have that tendency, it's not. It's very thoughtful in the moment. It's they want to help people. They want to help people that come to them with problems. They want to be a problem solver. They want to make this person's experience or this. They want to help this person or fix their pain or whatever, and act narrowly on their last interaction they had, and will make proclamations or do. A person has come to them because they're in some authority, right? And they'll express to them this problem and how it makes them feel. And this person, in trying to be kind and trying to be helpful, will immediately promise, I'll do, how about if I do this for you? Would that make you feel better? Oh yeah, that would be great. Well, then they've made a commitment. Right. Now they've got to act. And what follows is a kind of self-congratulatory, well, I made a promise and I'm going to carry through on it. But it was ill-advised and poorly executed. But yeah, maybe that one person feels great about the whole situation.
And now they're emotionally invested in it. Yeah. And that person may not be satisfied with it either. Right. Self-serving bias. You credit your successes to yourself and blame your failures on others.
Narcissism 101.
Yeah. Right. Wow. We don't even need to. There's so many examples of that.
Yeah.
Right. I think the one example, though, which is a more general one that I think is problematic, is companies keeping their profit to themselves, but getting bailed out by the government when they have problems. That is entirely self-serving. They are socializing the risk and
privatizing
the profit. And I think that's completely a self-serving bias and damages the entire economy. So,
well, and it's kind of one of the 7 habits of successful people is the take credit for the work of others. It's in the list of things to do, not the.
I don't think that's
7 habits of productive people.
Okay,
right there's that, but then there's another list of, and it is an absolutely cold-hearted, ruthless. It might have been the Genghis Khan
or Machiavelli or something.
Well, take credit for the work of others. If you want to succeed, if you want to progress, if you want to get promoted, take credit for the work of your underlings.
See, I don't agree with that.
I don't either, but it works. It has worked.
Oh, I've seen it work. I've seen people take credit for my work. I don't. Yeah, but I think it works in the moment, but it's a short-term thing, because in the long term, I don't think that proves successful.
Well, I don't know. I think that if in a well-run company or in a well-run organization, yeah, it doesn't hold up forever.
Right.
But I think that to use it as a strategy for success is possible, but you spend all your time managing your own image, not actually being productive in the company. And that's where it'll trip you up. But if your company isn't well managed, if it is a sort of a top-down autocratic sort of a thing where if you suck up to the right person in the right order and at the right time, and you cover your tracks sufficiently, you can use a lot of these other biases that we've talked about.
Yeah, I have seen executives rise to the top by taking credit for the work other people do and never making a decision unless they knew what their boss's boss would agree, would decide. So they're playing, they're not just sucking up to their boss, they're sucking up levels higher than that. I've seen people rise in a company because of that.
Yeah, and I've seen it also where it's don't make a decision unless you've got someone to blame if it goes wrong.
Ugh.
You make a decision, but you put somebody else in charge of implementing that decision, and when it fails, it's not your fault, it's theirs.
Right. So, the spotlight effect. You think others notice your mistakes or appearance more than they do?
Assuming everyone saw you trip over a curb. Well, okay. I mean, that's a relatively harmless bias, I think, to have.
Well, I think that although what it can be a reflection of narcissism.
Sure. Oh, yeah, certainly. If you're afraid of a fissure in the facade,
right?
Then that can be self-harming.
Yep.
But I think that that's what being embarrassed is, right? Is that you think everyone saw you do this dumb thing and you're embarrassed because, well, your self-image is tied to it, right? And in fact, this is something we have both learned as royalty, that you invite someone to sit at head table with you and they're worried that they're going to make a mistake, that they're going to spill something or slurp their soup and everybody's watching them and they're going to be embarrassed. No, nobody's watching you. Nobody cares. We are not that important to them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a way to get over that.
Yes, but I think the if people think that all the time, then they're not paying attention to those moments when people are watching, and that that's there are moments when people are watching what you say and do, and it's important to recognize those because there are other moments when people aren't.
And well, yeah, and I think that's the thing is most of the time people aren't watching and don't care.
Right.
But when they are watching and do care, you should recognize it.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you've done something that paints you negatively, that's something you've got to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Not just making a mistake, but I mean,
yes,
doing something wrong.
Yes,
is different.
Yes. The sunk cost fallacy. This is the last one on the list. You stick with something that's not working due to what you've already put into it, or throwing good money after bad.
Well, and how many relationships have we been in, the two of us, between us? Well, I said I'd be in this for the long haul, and man, it's a lot more hauling than I expected.
Well, and you have to know when to say when. So, which is the other part of that. It's not giving up on something too soon, but it's not hanging on to something after it's
right. There is, and I think you said earlier, there's a cost benefit analysis that you have to do in relationships at some point.
Yes. Well, and emotional cost and emotional benefit.
Oh yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. The example they say is watching a bad movie to the end because you paid for the ticket. I will say that I did stay to the end of Disney's The Black Hole, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Terrible dialogue, terrible special effects, terrible premise.
The science was all wrong.
Oh, it was completely wrong. But it was Disney's response to it's funny because it was Disney's response to Star Wars. So it was made shortly after Star Wars came out. and now Disney owns Star Wars. So I think it's funny, but terrible, terrible movie. I stayed to the end because I couldn't believe how bad it was, and I wanted to keep watching it to remember the experience, to have it as a comparison for every other movie I've ever watched. But it is
one end of your bad movies curve.
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, there's, Plan 9 from Outer Space, but that's in another category of bad. That's not big budget bad.
Right. Yeah. Black Hole had a budget.
But it is the only movie I think that I've come out of the theater and told people standing in line that it was a terrible movie and they shouldn't waste their time watching it. But I did stay till the end of it. And there are things, you and I both have a certain amount of stick-to-itiveness, which one might be called stubbornness, or
to the unkind and unenlightened, they might call us stubborn. I prefer to think of myself as uncompromising. Discerning and uncompromising. That's
yeah. My mother called it obstinate.
Yeah. Okay. I think anything with at least 3 syllables is worth hanging on to as an adjective for yourself.
But there are certainly examples of throwing good money after bad that people have done. But I think
we could look at the military for that.
Well, but there are other reasons sometimes for projects that have everybody says don't do it and it still keeps going forward, not because there's money that's already been sunk into it, but because somebody's donors, constituency,
money
lobbyists.
It's not about the money that's been spent; it's the money yet to be made.
Exactly.
Certainly, but there are plenty of examples of the military has this, and you can ask any soldier. The military has this thing. Well, this is how we're going to use this thing because we have this thing, and we're going to make it work this way, even though it doesn't work the way it's designed to do. We're going to modify it this way, and we're going to add this thing, and the next iteration will have this clip here, and this, it's because the money has already been invested in this thing. We've already produced 2 million of them. We have to make them work.
Right.
So we're going to invest another 1 million to make them work the way they were supposed to be in the first place. But anyway. Yep. So that's a pretty thorough list.
Yes. And I think going back to, again, the debate episode, it is useful when watching a debate or a discussion to say, well, can I identify any of these cognitive biases? Do I understand what's going on? And if I understand what's going on, then the question becomes, what do I do about it? How do I make a decision based on my understanding of these biases that are going into the discussion, the information being presented, the analysis, and so on?
Right. And it's a 2-pronged sort of thing where you're looking at this person is arguing from a basis of a cognitive bias. Okay, and it's useful to be able to recognize that, and at the same time saying what cognitive bias are they trying to use to prey upon me?
Yes.
What are they trying to take advantage of? And like we keep saying, that we all have these. From time to time, we're all guilty of one or the other of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but being aware that you can be caught in these things and being vigilant and honest with yourself, you can be caught less, right?
Yes.
And if you're honest with yourself, recognizing that you've been caught and admitting to yourself that, oh yeah, okay, they got me with that one. Yep. And backtracking and undoing damage
Yep.
that may have come from it. So they're my advice to everybody, philosophically and otherwise.
I think that's pretty good analysis of or description of all of these.
Yeah, right. No, this is a very useful little chart here.
Yeah.
Giving us examples and descriptions and allowing us to springboard from that. We thank you, Mr. Wright.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Take all these things on board, everyone.
Yes.
Please like and subscribe and share and spread our wisdom to all of your friends that need it, and especially if they're dwelling in the darkness of these biases.
And if you have something you like discussed, please share that comment with us. We'd really enjoy hearing about that. And yeah.
Okay.
So
until we see you again, we don't have any ideas for our next episode right off the top.
I think a complete analysis of the collected works of Don Knotts.
Well, I mean, I think the pinnacle of his career was the incredible Mr. Limpet.
I was going to say that for myself. I agree. A close runner-up is The Reluctant Astronaut, but I think Mr. Limpet outshines that. So
yeah.
The combination of live action and animation, I think, is really stellar. So.
And I applaud all of his work with Tim Conway, another physical comic genius. But that's for another episode.
Tim Conway.
Oh yeah, the Apple Dumpling Gang.
Oh yeah.
Come on.
Of course. Yeah, sorry. Of course. Yep. Okay.
So yeah, sure.
No, I don't think that's going to be it. But
no, we could do another. We could do another sword movies.
Oh, we could do that.
We had a lot of fun with that earlier, and that was, I think, when we were still all audio.
Yeah.
We might actually be able to put up some clips or some photos from some of the movies that we're talking about this
We
time.
might not be able to because they might be copyrighted, but we could do we could hold up stick figures and hold them up and do
Well, I think copyright only holds. You can use a clip as a reference or as a a certain duration
in a review, right?
Yeah, right. Which is what we're doing.
So, yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe we could do that. Maybe we could point out. Maybe we could do an episode on movie armor.
Ooh,
stupid. Movie
big
armor.
Spiky things that, if you raise your arm, will impale you. And,
right, or the completely useless chainmail sideless surcoats from Ladyhawk.
Ugh.
You remember those? I just was watching a movie. We should probably close before we go into all.
Yeah, we really should.
So maybe look for this in an upcoming episode. Maybe not next one, but I think we got a kernel of an idea here.
Okay.
So until then, be thou
a good night
and true.